Ionics, and welcome back to a new quick win. Today we're talking about Ionic Storage version 3. This package came out, or the updated version came out a few months ago, and I noticed that a lot of you had questions under my previous examples for CRUD operations with Ionic Storage, because the setup for that package changed slightly. You have to init it in a different way, you have to define the drivers a bit differently, and I also noticed some race conditions on my own. So in this quick win, I want to show you how to integrate Ionic Storage in your Angular applications, how to use some basic operations to read and update data, and then also how to handle some errors that you might encounter after adding a driver to use SQLite database inside a real application. So without further ado, let's dive right into it. Alright, let's start with something easy, and that is setting up our application. We're gonna start with a blank application and we install the Ionic Storage package. And with Ionic Storage version 3, we have to use Storage Angular if we're using Ionic Angular. Otherwise, I think you can still rely on Ionic Storage, or perhaps it's even Ionic Storage React View. We'll have to check out. I'm not really into those. On top of that, I will generate a new service so we can keep all of our storage interaction in that service. For the integration of Ionic Storage, we have to head over to our app module now, and I just noticed that usually I have my sidebar on the right side in these videos. Yeah, and that was the wrong file that I closed. Great, good start. Okay, go ahead with Ionic Storage module for root, and the import comes now from also Ionic Storage Angular. You can specify some options in here. Those are completely optional, so we can keep this without any options, but you can check out the options here: name, version, size, drive order. We will get to especially this later on. For now, let's just say name my database or something like that. Doesn't really matter. Unless you're migrating, then it's a bit more difficult, but we will talk about that in the end. Now, let's go to our data service, because that's already basically enough for the basic integration of Ionic Storage. Then you go ahead and inject storage. Be careful. In Visual Studio Code, the first import is usually not the one you want. You want, well, either this one, yeah, that kind of works. Just make sure you're importing from Ionic Storage Angular. And then we have to call a little initializer function. This is storage.create. Previously, we had a ready promise where we could use that promise. Now we need to make sure that storage create is called the first thing in the beginning. So I'm gonna put it in here. I know some of you will say, well, this might not be the first place in your app. And yes, that's right. We will talk about that once we get to that error, because we can, first of all, build a simple case even with this kind of wrong code. Well, it still works in most cases, but we will see. Okay. To get data, we can now call storage.get, and I also, in my example, created a little key, because if you need to use that key or get data from a specific key multiple times, definitely make it a const relay. In my example, I had this in 3 places where I had like my list, and I was already, no, that's definitely not what I want to do. Let's add 2 more functions here. We will go quite quickly through them because it's more about the grand scheme of Ionic Storage. So to add data, you could make this really easy. You can await the promise to get the data from your key, or as a fallback, use an empty array. It's especially important because the first time your application launches, this will be undefined or null. I'm actually not sure what, you can give it a try. But once you start developing, there will be some data, and if you don't have this fallback later on, you won't really notice it anymore. So make sure that getting data has some kind of fallback. I think that's always a good idea, either array or whatever kind of information you store. Then we push our new item and set it once again for the storage key, and removing an item works basically the same. Getting the data, Now splicing the data instead of calling push and then storing it again. It can be as easy as this. Now let's put this to use, and in the background maybe also run Ionic Serve would be a good idea. So within our homepage we're gonna inject our data service, and then we're gonna let's use a function async load data to grab the data. So we got some list data, will be an empty array. And once we get it, we can actually directly assign this if we want to. So we could set it to this dot list data equals await this dot data service get data. All right, that will give us back the data. And now we just need to call load data. To add and remove data, I will also add two simple functions in here. Adding data, I will just add a random value using the add data and then call load data again. This pattern of you add something to storage and then you completely reload the data isn't perfect in most cases because, well, it requires another read to our storage. I don't want to make it more complicated than necessary in this video, but usually I would recommend you keep track of the data here with a local variable. So when you first load the data, you can set it, and then whenever you change the data on the storage, you can also just locally change the data and use that in here. So that means you don't have to call a real reload on the storage, and you're just using the updated data from the service. Same, of course, for remove data. In this case, I also do it. I just call remove and then splice my own data here. That always comes with a problem of data inconsistency. If you have something else now in storage than you have in your local variable, but usually you can manage that quite good. Now let's head over to the home page. I'm gonna build an Ion list with Ion sliding item. Oh, that also comes with a list already. Okay, we're gonna put in our ng4 here, let name of list data, yeah, lowercase, and let's use the index as well. In the label we're gonna put the name. We're gonna remove one of the buttons since we don't really need that. Let's remove this one, make this one to the end. Ion item option, click remove, what's it called? Remove item, and then we just pass in our index. And I don't like a text in here, so I will go with an ion icon name trash slot icon only. Makes the icon a bit bigger if you're using icon only. Then to finally add some data, let's quickly add a snippet for a fab button to the end, which we'll just call add data. Now here comes the application. Let's make this a bit smaller and open our development tools. Perhaps I'm gonna add a few locks here and there just to make things clear. I'm gonna lock out init, and actually this is async, so we can also put in wait in here inside our storage. And then we're gonna go with done. So this is a little preparation for the problem I want to show you in a few seconds. Okay, there we go. We don't have any data in the beginning. That's fine, we don't crash. Now we add some data, Simon69 of course, and then more data, and we can easily remove that data and everything seems to work. Just as a quick reminder, you can always go to application. Yeah, sorry, I just had to look it up. Of course, it is here under the name that we gave it, my database, and there is my list with the values we just added. So when I now remove something, I can refresh this and we should see the updated data. But that was only the first part. That's the basic integration and everything works. We don't see any error. That's great. Now let's improve this because I don't want this now. For a device, if you plan to run your application as a native iOS or Android application, you usually don't want to use the IndexedDB, which is the default driver. Instead, you want to use the SQLite database. And to use this, there are two options. If you're using Cordova, you can add the Cordova plugin for Cordova SQLite storage. If you're using Capacitor, which I'm doing and I also recommend, of course, you can just npm install this Cordova package. And then afterwards, you go ahead with the installation for local forage, Cordova SQLite driver. I actually think I have already installed, but let's just do it for the fun once again. This means now when your application runs, it can use SQLite for the storage mechanism in the background on a device. You just need to configure it to do that. And that's what we're gonna do now. Therefore, we head over to our app module. And in our configuration here, where we already got name, we can now specify the driver order, and that's an array. So usually can we import this as well? That would be epic. Yeah, of course not. Maybe this one. Yeah, that's actually right. So within drivers, we will find IndexedDB, local storage, secure storage is a paid storage option from the Ionic company. You can use it if you have paid for it. But usually you have something like IndexedDB and drivers.local storage as the default order of drivers. Now with our additional driver for Cordova SQLite, we can import it like this, star as Cordova SQLite driver from local forage, the package we just installed. And then we can put it in front of this list and add _driver. Now, when possible, and that means only on iOS or Android devices inside a native application, the Cordova SQLite database will be used instead of the IndexedDB or local storage. Inside the browser, it will still simply continue to use IndexedDB. But so far, that's not all. Only defining it is not enough. We also need to tell storage about this right before we create the database. So in this spot, we can now call this.storage define driver, and we have to go with the same import like we did before. So let's copy this from our other file, Cordova SQLite driver, and put it in here. Okay, we have defined it, we've set it as the first element in the order of selected drivers. Now let's see what the result is, please. Let me see the error now. That was really everything I was hoping for. Okay, exactly what I wanted. Error database not created, must call create first. That's probably something you all saw, and that's the reason you're in this video. You might have used some code for storage version 2. And now you're not calling create. That's usually already done by this line. But now we see that we got the init log, and then we got the get data log, because our page is the first page and basically immediately fires off the call to get data. So we see init, get data, blah, 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 and then done. That means the storage isn't even ready when we are trying to access it. And that's what I wanted to show you with this video as well. There are two solutions for this problem. Solution one is commenting out our init function in here, moving into the app component and injecting our data service, because the app component is really the first place of your application that's initialized. By putting it in here, you give it like a little head start. And once you save this, you will see init, done, get data, the error is gone. Now, I don't feel 100% confident about this approach. Yeah, it works right now. It might work all the time. I don't know. I don't have any data about that. But still, your page might be able to fire off that get data call before this is actually finished for whatever reason. So as an alternative to this, while this is really a super easy approach and you can just go with it most likely, I wanted to show you one additional fallback in case you want to make everything really secure and be sure that it will definitely work 100 times out of 100 times. So in that case, you could use inside your data service a storage ready behavior subject, like this, and you give it the initial value false. Once the storage is created, you're gonna call next with true, meaning, okay, now my storage is ready. And you now got two options to use this. Either you expose the behavior subject and your other pages subscribe to the subject and only fire off their own calls when this subject returns true. That is one way. Another way to make it perhaps easier for your pages is to use it inside the service. So we could now go ahead and return this dot storage ready, and we're gonna add a little pipe block in here because we want to filter out the values, and we only want to pass through this filter if we're actually ready. That means simply ready needs to be true. And now we can switch map to something else, not really interested in the result from before, and we're gonna return this. Why switch map? Well, because we're switching to a different observable. Oh no, Simon, this is not an observable, that's a promise. Yeah, that's why we surround it with from. And in the other case, we're gonna just use off. So we're definitely returning a observable in this case as well. So we're filtering out the ready state and we're basically waiting for it. Let's put a log in here. Okay, let's go. And then the only thing that's red is our home page, because this is now not a promise anymore. Instead, we have to use it as an observable. So let's comment this out and change it to something like this. It kind of feels more natural anyway. I always had a little problem with storage returning promises while all the other stuff in my application is returning observables. So perhaps that approach actually feels better to you if all your calls are just returning observables. Now let's hit save again, and yeah, now we want to remove this for our testing case because otherwise we're gonna get mixed results. And then once again comment this line in. Let's check it again. Init. We're calling get data immediately, but we're not yet executing it. We're waiting until done because that turns our storage ready to true, and only then this function will continue with okay, let's go, and returns the value. So now you've safely wrapped the creation of Ionic Storage, the asynchronous creation with defining the driver. I really just noticed the problem when we added this line, but I wanted to show you this alternative, and I hope that helps for some scenarios. Really, the other approach with the app component could work, but this is really 100% safe now. And of course, you could also add this logic to the other functions in case your application is making any other call directly in the beginning, but usually it's about getting data. One final word about the migration. If you plan to migrate an application that you already got from version 2 to version 3, you should check out the article on the Ionic framework blog about this. You need to uninstall the old package and install the new package, and basically I think that's it. You just need to make sure that you don't change the name of your database, otherwise it won't find the data. But otherwise, I think there are no further changes regarding the migration. Check it out. It's just a short blog about the name and the driver order, but we already covered that. So you should be usually fine if you don't make any massive changes suddenly to the driver, to the database name, or anything like that. And once you're done with this, you can really use the basic CRUD functionalities like before. You can call get, set, remove, get keys, length, all the default operations on Ionic Storage, just like before. Just make sure you're getting this initial block right. So set it up, don't implement any kind of race conditions in your application, or you will later get a lot of trouble. Alright, and that's it for today's quick win. I really hope this helps you to implement Ionic Storage in your own applications. It's really a great storage mechanism as it will always select the best possible available driver, starting with IndexedDB and then local storage, or even on a device automatically putting your data directly into SQLite storage, where the data is really completely safe and won't get cleared by the operating system if you add the driver in the right order and also take care of that potential race conditions that can happen with that code. If you want to check out the full quick win, link below the video for all Ionic Academy members, and if you're not yet an Ionic Academy member, go check it out, ionicacademy.com, my place to help you with everything Ionic, courses, community, templates, everything that you need to get better with Ionic and release epic Ionic apps. Of course, make sure to subscribe to the channel and give the video a like if you enjoyed it as well, so we can grow further. And then I hope you have a great week with epic Ionic coding, and I will catch you next week or inside the next video. So happy coding, Simon.